organizing issues, find winners for them, prioritize coordination, and look for unnecessary work and cut it. I was going to go through an exercise to see what that means to people, because I think that means a lot of different things. So I just want to clarify and get kind of consensus with everyone and then move on from there. So what does cutting work actually mean? And I think that's for each, working group to decide if, what are the primary functions that we need to maintain. Hey, Gideon.
Hey.
Hey, Libby. How's everybody? We are going to be done with the experimental sprint planning. I gave it 2 shots, and I think it's, a rough look at it. But we're going to try to incorporate some of the elements in it. But we're going to get back to the regular. Let's get back to Zen Hub and creating issues.
Wait, what?
I said.
No.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Gideon. You're mute.
Wait, what are we doing? Sorry.
We're getting back to the traditional sprint planning.
Oh, what happened? It was just the last sprint that I thought we decided we would try this. The swarming around a particular.
We are, but we're gonna go with the issues first, and just do it together within Zen Hub. I don't know. I just felt like it was still uncoordinated and not where we wanted to be. I wanted to collectively decide on this issue, our sprint retrospective issue. So this is what I wanted to talk about. How do we swarm around this and then create a task list and add it to this? But I would really, I don't know, you've pretty much cleaned up this. So I didn't really realize that until now.
Sorry, I didn't have a chance to watch that retro yesterday, and I wasn't able to join because of the parent teacher. Do you want to give me an update on the retro? So, in fact, yeah, I guess since there's not so many of us, it's not a bad use of our time to do that. I apologize that I didn't reach out to you earlier.
So we went through, and as you can see here, a lot of the positive things were, around our kind of new products, curation service, the ABC advanced page, could do better, centering around coordination and the kind of uncertainty in working groups, roadmap being a big one as well. And then things to improve swarmed around this idea of kind of building a roadmap, revisiting the foundations of what we're trying to accomplish. And this is the winner, which is organize issues and look for unnecessary work and cut it. And so really, I think the conversation that we can have right now is centered around this retrospective winner. And that is, what does it mean to look for unnecessary work and cut it? And how do we go about doing that? And so I wanted to create a task list for us to swarm around in terms of succeeding with this. So I know that, Olivia, you had a lot of thoughts around prioritizing coordination, and I was curious if you had any kind of details of what that actually means in our current context, and what are some tangible things that we can actually do to get there.
No, yeah, that's why I came today, because I was thinking, I don't know how. I feel like there is a disconnect between all the things that have to be done and the people that come to the sprint plannings. Like, it feels a little bit useless. Everybody that comes to the calls are like overwhelmed and can't take any issues. Yeah,
I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like that's all we can do is plan with the people that are in the room at that time. And if that means moving at a significantly slower pace, and I think that's just kind of what we have to deal with. But right now, it's just getting commitments from the people in this call right now and saying, hey, what can we collectively do in order to kind of inch closer to where we need to be. Perhaps other people have different views on that, but yeah, go ahead, Gideon.
Yeah, so just stating bringing out the elephant in the room, I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Obviously, this has come up multiple times, but I think a lot of it is the relationship with the academy and like straightening that out, which is something that we're working on. That's in progress. But our kind of like overall strategy at a high level, like where we want to go, we've been doing a bunch of work on that in Sampo, but it feels like we're a little bit stuck on that front, and it's hard to bring it out and engage the whole crew, the broader crew on that until we resolve the things with the academy. So I do think, so it does feel like we're a little bit stuck. I think that's kind of what we're seeing is we're trying to move forward on stuff, but at the same time, there's no roadmap, and we're kind of waiting to clarify that roadmap until we know what the thing is with the academy. So it's like this cycle, and that doesn't feel good, right? We're all kind of, there's like some frustration. So I do think I do like your idea though, Nate, about like taking a hard look at the stuff that we are doing right now, and just saying like, okay, what if we really did try to shift our focus to become more relevant to the field of token engineering? What are the things that we're doing right now that just feel inward looking and very bureaucratic and process, like process for the sake of process? And how do we cut that? So like actually, hi, it looks like, like the Communitas crew, like Yurem and Costa and Eduardo, like they're doing a big push right now to just clean up the Discord, right? And like that's like an example of like how do we just clear out the clutter, So like I think maybe there's some ways that we can do that with our processes too, so that we're not feeling as stressed out by doing a bunch of stuff that just in the big picture, like it seems like it matters, but honestly, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I guess I'd pass it around to each of the working groups like Zepi and Chewy and Wonka. Is there anything right now that we're currently doing that can be cut, and what are the impacts of cutting that, and what type of functions do you see being the most important that your working group offers? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I also reframe it a little bit?
Yeah.
Rather than things to cut, I think what we need to do is like, what does the TEC need? Like ask ourselves again, what does the TEC actually need? And focus on what we actually need to deliver, and then the things that need to be cut become obvious. But I like actually focusing on like what the TEC needs, what helps the TEC, and then the things that don't are like, oh well, we should stop doing all the other stuff.
Yeah, and so considering that's it's quite a broad ask. So I think that, because it could come from like, what do we need from a comms perspective or communications perspective? What do we need from like a community perspective? I think that there's a lot of different angles that you could approach that as. So, perhaps we can just go around and ask around and see if there's any consensus around certain topics or certain areas that are really important. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, certainly. And definitely like each working group steward, like even you and me, we could say like, what are the needs of the TEC from the stewards? And we've sort of mapped that out in the proposal we have for the steward transformation. And we could also say the other need is for us to execute on a plan now, to start actually taking action. So I'd say like for the stewards working group, what the TEC needs now is for us to execute on that plan. And maybe that would help. That helps a lot. And and I would ask, like you're saying, each working group to think about their working group, and maybe they see other things in other working groups, other things that aren't even in a working group. All of it can come up, but it would be, I think, helpful for each working group to really focus on, for the stewards, what does the TEC really need right now from the stewards working group, and from SoftGov, what does the TEC really need from SoftGov, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, yeah. Would you like to start off with the stewards?
Yeah, I think I'll be honest, I think a lot of the uncertainty that is causing like, we don't really know, it's a lot of it is the steward's transformation. It's like, well, where are we going to go and what is our relationship with the academy? And we can't even talk about it until after the launch of TE Fundamentals. So that's still 2 weeks away. And it's like, we need to start doing things now. How do we start doing things now if we don't know, if we can't even have a conversation about our future for another 2.5 weeks? So I feel like I'm in this holding pattern that's making me a little like zany, to be honest. But I think we should just start doing some actions. Like, you and I mapped out the nomination process. Let's share the nomination process, start nominating common stewards, start building together the advisory group. For me, what I think the TEC, and I'd love to hear other people's opinion on this too. This is not, I think that there's, I have blind spots. But I think acting on the transformation plan is a need for the TEC. What else do you think is a need from this working group?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the uncertainty has a lot to do with.
Are we writing this anywhere? Is this?
I'm writing it on the retrospective side here.
Thank you.
So the advisory group and the transformation process, I do think is really, really important. I also think it's really important to start having conversations around having this kind of like long-term roadmap that's a little bit bigger in scope, kind of just directing us where we're going. I think a lot of the working groups right now, we're saying cut on necessary things, but we're also not saying this is the direction you need to be heading. There's very little guidance in terms of like, hey, this is what you need to be doing. So everybody's just kind of floating in the ether. And so I think eliminating that uncertainty and kind of giving direction to the working groups is really important. It's one of those things that's really difficult because like Sampo, for example, has a direction. It knows exactly where it's going. But the other working groups are kind of like, hey, how do we support this? I don't know. Is it an isolated effort? Is it, this small group of people doing all the work right now? And I think that's really something that we should definitely get rid of. If we're going to have the working groups organized the way they are, we need to be all on the same page about what initiatives are going to be supported, what initiatives that we all need to gather around and swarm around. And I think that Sampo, since they have the momentum and they're leading these certain product initiatives, that each working group should be helping them in one way or another. And I know that you have your own clarity and that you're organizing Sampo from that perspective. But I think there would be a really good opportunity to have some type of input from other working groups to say, hey, I can help out with this. I can do this from the comms perspective. I can do this from a transparency perspective, and have those groups organize around you. But yeah, that's just my personal opinion from the steward's perspective.
Is it okay if I inject some or just respond? So I would love to do that. I think this stuff, let's just take the curation service, for example. Like, there's no way that Sampo can do that by itself. Like, this is not just a TEC initiative, but it's actually broader than that. So we need to do community organizing on Twitter. We just need to pull in everybody. I think the part, if I'm really honest, the part that's a little bit frustrating right now is that, there's a strategy that I've been trying to work on within Sampo. That's not just a Sampo strategy, right? It's like a TEC-wide strategy. But it's been hard. Tam and Livy know this, I think, and Nate knows this too. But what's been hard is that we've been kind of afraid to talk about this broadly because of. I would love to be able to talk about it broadly, but it feels like it's just a very sensitive time right now with the academy. We don't want to be making steps. Like we want to do the planning and the kind of the looking at future services and things like that with the academy, but we've been told that we can't do that yet, and it's totally understandable because this isn't like an academy bashing thing at all. Like they have to focus right now, but it's kind of putting us on hold. And so it feels like there's this, there is some moment when I hear the, like we need some kind of path forward or strategy forward. There's something that we're working on here, but it feels stuck because of that. And I feel bad. I do feel really bad about this because like I would love to, get all of the stewards in on that too, but it feels a little bit stuck right now. So that's the tension that I'm holding right now. And so when I hear things like this about like, oh, we need, we need to move forward and have like a big vision and stuff like that. This is the challenge, is how do we, it may be that we just have to sit on this until we can have this conversation. But I do think that there is some merit to, given that uncertainty, maybe looking at the stuff that we're doing right now to kind of free up space in advance of when we can really focus on like what we want to do. That's the best way I can articulate the situation that I see right now.
Yeah, and I just want to add something to this because the TE Academy, from my perspective, this has been a common, like the one thing that we're talking about here is the TE Knowledge Commons, the Consilience Library, and the Curation Service, and this kind of overlap that I see happening. And Omega is still pursuing this Consilience Library, and I'm kind of confused at like why we haven't got everybody into a room and said, hey, we have a lot of overlap and a lot of duplication of efforts here. Let's unify under a single vision and move forward. Because I do think this is where the biggest, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is the halting of the TE Academy. That's where the conflict lies between the T, what the T Knowledge Commons, what they're set out to do. Is there any other point of conflict that I'm missing in terms of blockers?
I don't know if you're direct asking me that. I do think, so we're sitting down next week with the Omega team to show them the prototype. And I think they're very excited about using this curation service. So I think that'll work its way out. We just wanted to kind of like have a prototype, and it seemed like helping comms would be was the most important priority right now in terms of like helping with the tweets and like generating some content that we can share in TEC Twitter. But it does I am pretty confident that the Omega team will be interested. This just seems like a natural fit. So I'm not worried about that so much. And I think that there's opportunities for SoftGov to use this tool and to really, do some community organizing that's like specific to special interest areas. I think there's huge opportunity there. I think that the issue with the Academy is probably broader than just like the knowledge commons. I think it's more, but that's my perspective.
Okay. No worries.
I actually don't feel comfortable talking so much about the conflict with TE Academy. I don't think that's the main point of a blocker for us. I think we're having a huge coordination issue, and that's what we should be focusing on. I like what Tim proposed to look at what each working group can offer to the TEC, and I feel like going in circles with these conversations are not going to lead us nowhere.
Okay. Well, let's move forward then. Septi, do you want to talk about transparency and
yeah, I mean,
what
actually,
we can do with transparency?
What Dan was just saying, it's what I was actually planning for transparency. It's like, yeah, we're doing this transitioning, and it's like, okay, how can we make this transitioning smooth? So my idea was like get all the tasks like transparency silently doing, like security management, recordings, updating the decision taking, all those things. I was thinking of making polls of every activity that we are having on the TC that regarding transparency, and if the stewards are like kind of like 80% of the stewards agree, it's like I don't think it needs to go on a community vote. And it's like, yeah, if the stewards agrees, like, yeah, we want this or we don't want this, then we cut and yeah, and that's the idea. Like, get all the things we want. So those will still need funding, like later, and the ones we don't want, like we just remove them. I mean, that's the complete
what functions do you think are absolutely necessary for the TEC at this moment in time? Like in terms of
I mean,
the tasks that you do.
The most sensitive, I would say, like security management. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
And do you feel like you have enough people to do that? Are you is that strictly under your umbrella?
It's a task, like it's like, I think like anyone with enough trust can do, and it's like, it's not very time consuming, but you need to be there. Like, if something happens, like it's a task, like it's there, you don't work a lot of the time, but it's like when something happens, you need to be there.
You
but
have to be present.
It's very passive task, but I think it's important.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to get rid of that you can't, in terms of like tasks?
I mean,
I actually
like to do like some polls and then get feedback, and that's the process I was thinking for. And actually, I had a meeting yesterday, like on the next transparency proposal, we are not including the audit. And actually, yesterday I had a meeting with the CEO of Stewardship, with Lonis, and he's like we're kind of like, chatting together. They are doing all the work, but they are using my guidance to run some analysis on the work. So basically, like all the things like we had with the audit will be automatically be done by the work. So if we end up transitioning using the work, like as a whole, like all those things would be like for free. Like we will have it there. Like it's just a feature of the work. So it's, yeah.
That is nice. And do you need help with that initiative in terms of automating it?
I mean, actually, what we need is like, consensus with the stewards and transitioning to use Discord. The work, like they are building the tool, either we use it or not. It's just like, if the thing is like, if we want, because it's actually like pretty cool. Like, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to take like all the call, but it's like they have like all these milestones for each proposal, and then you can also, like, I was giving them feedback, like to integrate all of them for the analysis. And basically, like, just like, you see everything that's, you see, like, you trace all the money, and it's with graph, and it's nice, it's very clean. The only thing is, like, people need to use it, and also the people who ask for proposals on the TC had to agree to use it, and you can track the money of the people using the proposal. That's the only thing. Like, we need to embrace it on our culture.
And here's the thing that I want to challenge, like, does the TEC need D-work? Or is it a nice thing that maybe we can, like, I feel like there's been a few different working groups that have explored D-work, but we should maybe, get the response. Like, it doesn't seem that it's been very successful for the working groups that experimented with it. So I don't know that we should think about rolling it out to, make everyone in the TEC use it if it hasn't been successful in the groups that are already experimenting with it.
I mean, for teams, it did work like really good, especially because the audits would pretty much make themselves once everything was laid down in D-work. But I would agree with exploring different alternatives. Like back when D-work started out and we started helping out, like testing, it was a whole different product than what it is right now. I mean, great for D-work. I think it's an amazing product. Like we just used it also like for the tour, for like paying different artists. It was fun, but I don't think that at this point like it would benefit organizationally wise. I mean, even though transparency has really good advantages with it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I wanted to share. Like, it doesn't mean like every commons need to use D-work, but if some commons wants to be like transparent, like just use D-work and you are transparent automatically. That's actually what I wanted to share. That doesn't mean like the TC wants it. But what I'm trying to say is like it's a tool that it's there and do the job automatically. So you don't need to pay someone to do the job.
And this is one of those things that I would like to see clarity on, because when we not sure about, because it depends on the compensation scheme. Like how are we going to handle compensation? I still think that's another conversation that we haven't really figured out in terms of providing clarity. Especially because the steward transformation process proposes a lot of changes to how we do things, and I do think that if we're going to stick with the working groups that we have, having that option of having D work as a method for creating bounties, small scale bounties, and that's the way we compensate rather than these paid roles. I think that is a legitimate pathway for compensation within the TEC. However, we need to come to consensus on that type of topic. And so perhaps that can be something we discuss in maybe the Stewards Council coming up. But there are certain aspects of gaining consensus on how we're moving forward in terms of that is really important to answer these questions.
I also want to say that I think that there has already been some cutting off, and that it has happened over time. That first we, as the stewards, decided to not pass another proposal until certain time, and also now the comms team has also cut some of the teams and made just one team. And I think like there has already been some cutting, and we have to recognize and acknowledge that. And there has been a lot of contributors that whose participation has been going down. And I think that this is we don't have to think, okay, what do we have to cut right now, because we have already been cutting, and the cutting like presents itself, and it shows itself what needs to be cut. So I agree on the idea of maybe what do we need more right now. And for example, I know that also there are some working groups that are rethinking itself, and a lot of the work that they are doing, like Comunitas and comms, and maybe I always say this, and Nate, you're right, that maybe it may be ethereal of saying like flipping to the outside, but something that I would really like to see is like more relationships, or we talking here more about other communities. And I always think a Schelling point is like a meeting point, and here we meet only the people in the TC, but we need to meet here, and that the people here says, hey, I am from this other community, I am from this other community, let's share ideas. And I think that that's something that we are not doing, and it's there, like the diplomacy, the relationships, the things of, okay, how many projects are overlapping, why can't we increase communication so that we are not in that prisoner's dilemma, and we can find a third way to benefit everyone without all having to compete. I don't know, it's just this narrative that it goes back even to Ostrom, and I think we need to, I don't know how to do it, but I think that's how at least I would like to see it. The TC being a meeting point, some place where people say, hey, I'm gonna go there because I am going to have a very big overview of everything what is happening in the space, and not only what is happening inside their community.
Open up that we have a lot of time in this call, but I also thought maybe we can benefit from sharing the Miro board together. So on the Miro board to the right of where the last retrospective is a section that says, what does the TEC need? And you can also say need from the working group. And that way everyone can add post-it notes, and we don't have to we can continue the conversation, but we're not sort of stuck in conversation only mode. I'm going to continue on working on this board, cleaning it up a little bit, and I'll pass back to, I think really focusing on that, like not on cutting, like just what do we need? And then we might need things we aren't doing now. We're in a different context. So rather than just looking at what we're doing and what we should stop doing, think about what your working group provides to the TEC, what the TEC needs from that work stream, and then we can come up with how to prioritize those things.
Thank you, Tam. It's really awesome. Appreciate that. Yeah, this is great. So does everybody have a link to the Miro board? I assume they do. If not, let me know. Yes. So we'll just give like 10 minutes or so and just let's fill out as much as we can and we'll discuss.
It might also be interesting for us to, and we could do that too. It might also be interesting for us to go like group through group and have, each of the stewards think about their working group and share ideas and other people can make comments and add to the board too.
Okay. Yeah, so let's start off instead of TEC wide. We can start off with TEC wide. So let's just go ahead and pass it around for about a minute and just hear your thoughts. So we'll start off with, how about you, Chewy?
I'm sorry, I was I was just sneezing when you asked my name.
No worries.
Sorry about that. Okay. What does the TEC need? Wait, I haven't opened the Miro board yet, but you give me a second, I'll start adding my contributions. But yeah, I feel that mostly is about I don't know if saying like at this point and with like kind of like the different situations that we've had this week, I don't know if it would be like maybe like a euphemism to say like manage expectations from contributors, or if I would just like plainly say like that there's like no like contributors should not have like any expectations at this point until we figured out how things are gonna work. So I know that this is not the only working group that is struggling with contributors, compensations, and related stuff. But yeah, probably communications is the one that needs like the most, situation handling and management at the moment. So yeah, I would probably put a lot of attention in the next few days to change this. On the side of comms. I'll pass it to Septi.
I mean, can I just jump into that too? I mean, I would also add that as like, in comms, I see somebody with Twitter support for curation. And I also think just Twitter is like the main must have from comms. But I'd also, say like focusing, like what are the priorities of comms? Like maybe, filling out this board later and figuring out what is the TEC need from comms, and that's the work that you're doing now. Who did you pass to? Sorry, I jumped in.
Septi.
Yeah, I mean, I can say verbally like the task like we're doing, and if someone can just write them in the post-its, and then I guess like we decide which ones we want, which part we don't.
Yeah. If you just want to say like what you think TEC wide, what is it something that we need to be doing? Just one thing, and then you can pass it. What would your priority be?
Oh, you mean like for the TEC as a whole?
TEC wide, yeah.
I mean the roadmap. Like we need direction. I think that's the most important thing.
That's perfect. You can pass it on to the next person.
I'll pass it to Per.
Thank you, Septi. And so for TEC wide, I'm gonna just be quickly with this, but all of this conversation and all of these different things coming up, they always kind of bring me to the same thing, to the same kind of possible reason that this is all happening, and it has to do with direction. But I would say it's kind of like more fundamental than just direction, and I think it has to do with the purpose of the TEC, of the why of the TEC. Like I still don't feel that there's clarity on the answer for that, or if there is, I feel that people have different interpretations of why does the TEC exist, like, and also like what problem are we trying to solve as the TEC, as an organization, or what is the opportunity that we're trying to take over as an organization, and I feel that question of what problem, if we are able to answer it, then we might be able to find that really basic purpose of the whole things we do. And once we have that figured out, I think it will be way easier for all the working groups and all the contributors to really align to that unique purpose, because I think it's different from the mission and the vision. I feel they can be a little bit broad and not as fundamental, so it's kind of hard to go back to them and refer to them in any specific situation. Like, for example, right now I can't remember exactly what their mission is, but if we had a purpose, maybe it would be really easy to refer to, and if we, like what you guys were saying, like what does the TC need? If we see that we're doing something that is not aligned with this purpose, then it's probably something that we don't need, right? So trying to figure that out, trying to figure that question first of the problem, and then an answer for that question to become the purpose. That would be for me. I'll pass it to Libby. Or I don't know. Yeah, Nate.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. I think you hit it dead on the head right there. I think that is the key to it all. Like, even the mission, vision, values that we do have, I know we set out to become a Schelling point, but I don't know if we've ever asked us the question: are we even capable of becoming a Schelling point just as a single, Discord channel, as a single group? Like, the way I look at it now is that the Schelling point is broken down between so many multiple token engineering projects that we have a lot of gathering of token engineers in different places all over the place. And I think, instead of us becoming the Schelling point, that we facilitate the Schelling point by interconnecting these partnerships and these relationships, but having that clarity on what our mission, vision, and values are, and what our purpose is. Again, reframing it from the perspective of how do we get this economy working? How do we get this token engineering Schelling point? What does it actually look like in reality? Up the scale is really important to consider. So thank you for saying that. And Livia, I'll pass it to you.
Sorry, just really quickly before leaving. Sorry, just to add on to that really quickly. Sorry. Yeah, I feel that it's really good what you pointed out, Nate. I feel that the mission and this idea of becoming the Schelling point is the what, answering to the what we want to become. We want to become a Schelling point. But why do we want to become a Schelling point? What's the reason we want to do that? And I feel that's not stated in the MVV, and I feel we need something. I'm not saying to change those or delete those, but to add something else that we could define just as purpose, Sorry, go ahead, Libby.
No worries. Yeah, I'm just thinking now, listening to everybody, that this became like the one word, right, from mission, vision, and values that we got so attached to. And maybe that was a bad use of a word, because there are so many other things that are in our mission, vision, values that inform a little bit more what is TEC's purpose. So I think building safe, tokenized economic systems is something very important. Like, how can we create guidelines for safe token economics to be built? Who do we need to have around to do that? Like, how could the TEC help to standardize token engineering as a discipline? So token engineering is so nascent, is on the stage of becoming an academic discipline, of having multiple bodies of knowledge and people working on it, collaborating to this space. So it's not only the TEC, not only the TE Academy, not only block science, but it's like everyone that is contributing somehow to crypto economics. But if we want to make this into a public good, if we are not focused just on profit, but we are focused on getting it right, that's why having a commons body is important for the discipline, that is not only attached to possible profits that for-profit projects can have. So I think this is present in our mission, vision, and values. And I think there is a lot of the values that we have there that have been upheld. And there's a lot of what is written in there that we can come back to and realign with, and not perhaps be so focused on the Schelling point perspective. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's really well put, Libby. Yeah, we don't pay attention to much of the rest of the MVV outside of the term Schelling point, and so that is a mistake that we need to rectify in a lot of ways. Did you want to pass it to somebody?
I didn't know who hasn't gone. Maybe Iram?
Thank you, Livia. Yeah, I think a lot of great things are covered, but something similar to compensation model, I think in income or some sort of revenue or grant funding, not necessarily because we need to, like be making that money immediately or income, but I just sense that the lack of it is causing now, like Juan, you mentioned like cutoffs and layoffs, or people not engaging as much, and some sort of stress and anxiety and emergent conflicts that I just been witnessing. So yeah, I think like even though that shouldn't be our main focus, since we also want to do the work and go back and see, okay, what's the problem that we're solving, clarity on purpose, and before these, how do we even try to create services or products that may, or get grants to later on like fund other projects and help other projects in this token engineering community. Yeah, that there's still the need, I feel, from just, yeah, like energetically I've been feeling that sort of like frustration or maybe conflict or just stress and anxiety due to the lack of that. Yeah, if anyone went already, I'll just pass it back to you tomorrow. Or yeah, I think.
I don't have anything to add. I'll pass back to Nate to keep facilitating. I think you have something in mind.
No worries. I just want to get this the TEC wide conversation from everybody and perspective from everybody. Then we can individually add to individual working groups. But I think the TEC wide concerns are the ones that are kind of foundational to how we move forward. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Gideon.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, I think about this a lot actually, and I think that we are not really sure what we want to be when we grow up, like there's like this, the Schelling point is one thing. I think there's kind of like a Gitcoin kind of re-granting vision that's baked into that too. And Livy, to your point, I do I think it's really important, and to bear to your point too, like I think the Schelling point or the re-granting is really just a means to an end. It's the how, right? But the why is super important, that we just get good clarity on that. And I think that's actually pretty clear in the mission. I agree with you, Libby, that's like, we're building the field of token engineering. And that doesn't mean that we are building it, but it doesn't mean that we're building token engineering, that we're in charge of doing all of that. But it's like, what can we do if there's a field or a network that supports the coordination across the field? What would we be doing to support that field of coordination? Like an electromagnetic field is what I mean. It's like, if you can think of it as like the connections between people that kind of facilitate coordination, the coordination that might not happen by itself, like with one individual organization doing its thing. What are the things that no one organization could ever do by itself, but that together they might be able to do? That to me feels like a calling that's like definitely worth doing, and needed. So I think the problem that we're facing today is that we've kind of thought of ourselves as a Schelling point, but the reality is that we don't really have the people here to be a Schelling point, to be able to operate at that level where we are building the field and helping to kind of facilitate that. So I think of the Schelling point as like a means to that end. Like the Schelling point is it's not the reason, but it's the way. It's one way that we get there. And I think that without that critical mass of people coming here, and by here I don't mean to the TEC Discord server, I mean to the set of services and the activities that we're trying to help coordinate across the sector. Without that kind of engagement, then we don't have a lot going for us. I mean, honestly. So it's a bit like a social network in the sense that you need to have that kind of engagement and excitement with the core energy of this field and the people who are trying to kind of help pull that together. And I guess the last thing I'll say is building on what Irem is saying. Like, imagine Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or any of these networks trying to make money with nobody engaged there. Like, it just doesn't happen. So if we do decide that the Schelling point, like this bringing together and connecting people, is the path, the how we get to the why of helping to build this field, then that kind of social network-like aspect is where the value comes from, and from that value grows economic opportunity. But until we have that, there's really not much economic opportunity, whether it's like people getting individual stakeholder value, like token utility, or funders coming and saying like, wow, look at this is a thriving place where all these people are helping to build the field. I'm going to throw money at that because that's exciting. That's a simplified version of the way I see it. I don't know who hasn't gone. NTU, I don't think you've gone.
Thanks. Well, I am hearing a lot of kind of the same, and I agree. I sense that we were sort of building the roots, and now it's time to get the trunk together. And so for that, first, I think I like a lot the idea of a roadmap of just having some. I know the commons means a lot of different things for a lot of people, and that's the beauty of it. But that also makes it super complicated to get to coordinate towards something. So we have to compromise, take a decision, and work towards it, and iterate over and over again. And so there's a few things in there. So, for example, in the case of compensation, I think I agree a lot with Juanca. We have now to look at opportunities instead of things we have to let go. Especially because I feel like with the whole temperature of the community and how things are going, if we cannot get to the point where people are compensated and feel great, we won't probably be able to kick the TEC off from this stage. And so we have to be careful and strategic. I don't think we have to spend very little for the sake of spending very little. That's that. And then there's something more particular to my point, which is with all of these, with having a more common set of goals or whatever, I think we have to also up some of the operations management overall. We have a lot of dependencies, a lot of things that break and we cannot maintain. And I don't see now that we are prepared to deal with those things. Like, I don't know, the convert page is broken right now. A lot of people have issues. Also, the price of honey is going down, and that's a possible attack surface on Celeste, which pretty much secures our common pool. And so there's a few things there that we may want to think and we may want to take care of as we build the next step in the TC. And back to Nate, because I'm not sure who else.
Yeah, thank you, Auntie. I think Juanca, have you got a chance to go? I know you spoke a little bit, but do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. I also resonate with what Livy said of like also standards. Maybe we need to show better what we did in the TC, because it's still something difficult to explain for people who is outside, but maybe we can work better and on our narrative on how do we present ourselves, and going back to where we come from. I think that's also interesting. But I like the direction that we are going, and I think that sometimes we want things to go faster than we want, or like we can decide what to cut off. But I think that time and interaction and the value that we generate, like it's the one that ultimately can say which is the best direction that we want to go. So I just want to keep a positive mind on this process. And also what Enti said really resonated me, of like we having dependence on maybe other communities, and how are we trying to like have our own infrastructure in this Web3 environment.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of different foundational challenges that NT brought up. Celeste and Honey, and then XDAI and the maker community with the USDC debacle. That's still a looming thing that we still don't have a plan for. These are things that are long term, but they still remain issues for us. And out of all of this, I really appreciate everybody's input, and I think that's really important. If you have 10 minutes, if you can get into this Miro board, and please go through each of these working groups and add what you think is going to be beneficial in terms of what we can be doing in order to move forward. Please take that time to do so. I'm going to have 10 minutes here. But in terms of next steps and the sprint planning, I'm going to have to kind of defer to Tam and maybe get in as well in terms of what to do next. In my own opinion, I think what we should be doing for the swarm and the sprint is to develop a collective roadmap, and perhaps have a document that we all work on to develop that roadmap together. And so if that is something that might be a good idea for this sprint, I would, like to hear some feedback on that as well. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Tam.
I mean, my feeling is that we can give it a try, but there is many changes in progress right now that I think will end up impacting that roadmap in major ways, not just minor ways.
Yep.
So I think it would be interesting to hear what people would want to see in that roadmap. Something like, I think it's too hard to concretize, right? For the 6 months from today.
Yep.
Or the 9 months or 12 months from today. So I think once there's a few things that need to finish first. And I think those things are happening in the 2 to 4 week time frame.
Yep. And so since we are in a holding pattern, is there anything that we as community members can be doing to assist with clearing up those roadblocks?
I mean, maybe we're not really. I like the challenge that Livia shared earlier. I feel like I'm in a holding pattern, but that is maybe not. I don't think all the TEC is in a holding pattern. I think that the most important thing for the TEC right now is each working group to just, hey, if I were to create this working group today, what would it look like? Many of these working groups were created, okay, not Sampo, not the reward system, those are our newest ones, but many of the working groups are, a year and a half, 2 years old, and manifestos haven't really been updated or challenged or changed, and new processes haven't, so I think teams did a restructuring. I think it's worth looking at, what would your working group look like if you were to start it today? What would you present to the TEC as like the service that you provide to the TEC, the thing that the TEC needs? I think we got into a pattern of the idea that what we did is what we should continue to do because it worked before, and we're saying, okay, it doesn't work. We gotta change things and adapt to the new context and the new needs of the TEC, and the idea of the TEC is really built. We don't need to be in build mode anymore. So that I think that's the best use of the time. And then even just to say, well, how will the working group be able to focus on, like, what are the priorities, and how will that working group be able to focus on that priority over the next 2 weeks? Okay, I don't know. Yeah. I'd love to hear from other people. If other people think that trying to pinpoint objectives for the next longer term makes sense at this juncture, then it'd be interesting to hear those things.
Yeah, we'll open the floor to that. If anybody has any thoughts on that, please do speak up. There are some concrete things that I think are going to be universal within that roadmap, no matter what we do. I think partnerships is definitely one of them. But then again, this is something that we probably need some foundational guidance on. So perhaps this sprint planning, we could request that each of the working groups reevaluate their manifesto, maybe submit a new one that kind of redefines their role in this new phase of the TEC. And that way we can, allow them to go to their individual working groups and talk with the contributors within and say, hey, is this what we need to be doing right now? Does this match what our goals are, and what are our goals if not? But those are just my thoughts on terms of this sprint. So if anybody else has any ideas on this, please do speak
up. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think that not everybody is going to have a natural place to plug into the curation service, but Comms definitely does. I would love to see that. Communitas already playing a key role in that, and Comms is too. Like Acid Laser's been plugging in. I think that like this is a great opportunity for us to become relevant again and like start to build some excitement, like pull in some people around specific categories of token engineering, like things like governance, maybe safety, those kinds of things. And so, man, if there's like one area where we can just really focus and build some energy and like get the community excited again, that it's like, oh, TEC, look at this, it's pretty cool. Like, this is pretty cool. I think this is our window, at least in the next 3 months, is probably our best bet for like becoming relevant again and becoming an exciting place again. So I would love, if there are ways that people can plug in meaningfully into that, that would be great. I understand other people have other priorities and stuff, but I think there are a few key groups, comms, communitas, where that's particularly important right now. So, I don't know how we open that up to get broader involvement, but I think on a working group basis, but individually, we can all be contributing to the curation process itself and getting involved in engaging and having conversations around those things that other people are sharing.
I also think it's I don't know if that's like for right now, but I think it's increasingly important to start having more input from the senior token engineers on like prior to preparing a roadmap ourselves, have more insight into what do everyone else think of the field and what it needs, and then we can adjust to whatever how we see fit.
Also, something that I think we could do during this sprint, and that Tam brought up at the beginning of the call, that I think could provide a lot of clarity and certainty, is to figure out how to move forward with this stewards transformation. I feel that could be something that we could also focus on and push forward.
Yeah, sure. So there's a few things that Nate and I have been discussing around the nomination process and keeping it very similar. The nomination process, an offboarding ceremony, advisory group nomination process. There's a few of those things, and what we started. I don't know if this is I don't know. I think that maybe I don't know if this is the right place to discuss it, or if everyone is interested in it. But what we started talking about for the nomination process is to have it look a lot like the nomination process that exists now. So, for example, the current stewards would nominate commons stewards, and then there would be a chance for those stewards to say whether they wanted to or not accept the common stewardship, because it comes with a lot of responsibility, actually.
Wasn't the proposal sort of stating that working group leads were stewards, or
Yeah,
I think that makes more sense.
working group stewards. So there's working group stewards who would steward pieces of work, and then commons stewards. And that was the differentiation in the proposal, really, that there would be these different groups. So bring in an advisory team to be able to help make decisions, especially people that have experience and background in token engineering projects. And then an alumni steward group, and then the working group stewards would be stewards. They would remain stewards, but there would be another group of stewards who would really be focused on sort of the moving forward of the commons. So what we can see now in hindsight is that as the TEC was growing and developing new work streams, each of the leads of the work streams became a steward, and we ended up really with 15 stewards. And a lot of attention diffused across many different areas, which during the build maybe made sense. Now it makes a lot less sense and is also unsupportable financially. So there's the idea that working group stewards would be funded by token holders. So if you propose a piece of work and want to spin up a working group around that, you would create a proposal for conviction voting, and if it passes, the person would say who the steward is in the funding proposal. So this is happening now for each working group. Actually, that's how it happens now. And then there would be a group of common stewards who would really just be focused very strongly on the health and path forward of the commons. Often that the working groups would be complementary to that work, but yeah, there's that small group of common stewards would be really responsible for coordinating, but also making sure that the TEC is meeting key goals every quarter.
Yeah, and just to clarify that as well, I think that we have the current group of stewards that we have that were working group stewards within the TEC, nominating the common stewards and then having a vote on that. But then I think, did we come to agreement on that the working groups would decide to nominate their own working group stewards as part of that process as well, or is that something different?
I think for the working groups, those are really tied to funding from conviction voting. Gotcha. So the working group certainly would decide who the steward is, and the community would approve that or not approve that by the signaling and conviction voting.
Okay. Yeah. And
this
so
is the current idea, and what Nate and I need to do, this acting on the proposal, is to write this up and then propose it to for advice process. This is maybe the first advice process happening now outside of some stewards. Yeah. So, and then for the advisory group, this we thought we would open up to the community. But, there's certain people that have a history with the TEC and have vested interest in seeing the TEC succeed. So we thought it would make sense to get tacit approval for them, rather than just finding out that they're nominated through the forum, getting some buy-in from key advisors that we would hope would be willing to advise the TEC in a larger context.
Yeah, so I think that after listening to everyone, I think that the biggest aspects of sprint planning for this upcoming sprint is going to be the steward transformation process and the review of the working groups to renew their manifestos. So, or evaluate their manifestos and see what they can offer. So I think those are the two things that we're going to have here. And yeah, I will create that Zen Hub. And if anybody else has any thoughts, please let me know now. Yeah.
Maybe Indy, you raised the question. I'd love to ask if you have any more questions, or if anyone has any more questions.
Well, we chatted about this a few weeks ago with Nate. The only thing I don't really get is why would we choose nominating comms stewards instead of them being closer to say a regular contributor on terms of how they work with the working group, because I think nomination and all of that adds an extra sort of political step, and I'm not seeing the utility of that.
What do you mean? How else would somebody become a common steward? What would an alternative path look like?
I mean, they're pretty much like when we chatted, what I understood is that a comm steward's pretty much someone who's doing um, organizational work for the TEC on a higher level, and so that seems to me that that's something that say I don't want to say anyone, but anyone could do, and so maybe they just act like other contributors. I come to the working group, and if I am able to provide value for extended period of time, then I'm on the working group just pretty much as every other working group operates.
So working groups without actual steward designations.
I mean, I would consider them as a steward, comes to stewards anyways. It's just that the process is different. It's more like, I see it more like a meritocracy than political nominations. So you work your way towards it, and same way. Otherwise, if you have to be offboarded, you just, I don't know, stop contributing, have an agreement. Maybe the working group doesn't feel comfortable with you anymore, whatever. But I believe that brings, I guess I would say, more opportunity for anyone to become a comm steward if they wish to become one. And just, less tied to political power dynamics of me. Like, I don't know, if I were to end up doing the work of a comms steward, I would have to wait for any of you to notice me and then nominate me and go through a process. Why shouldn't I be able to just jump in on the working group and do my thing?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but that's the truth. Is that it does come with this political and social authority that sometimes the steward title people perceive, and I'm not saying it's right because I don't think it is. I think when we designate steward, it's just kind of a role of focus. If you're a common steward, you have a specific realm of thought and approach towards responsibility towards a certain area of a particular function within the TEC, rather than this is a designation of authority. And I think that is problematic in a lot of ways. If we have a comms working group steward, I see it more as this person is strictly focused on comms, and they're the ones carrying the institutional knowledge of that working group, the history of that working group, and they're somebody that can be trusted and relied upon to understand what's going on in comms. Rather than somebody who is moving from working group to working group to working group to working group and contributing where they can, because both of those things are valuable, but there's the designation that needs to be had for those two things. And unfortunately, that does carry some type of social authority, which is unfortunate. But yeah, that's
I just want to share, I disagree with that statement. Can I jump in? I disagree with that, actually. And I see it more the way you're seeing it. But there's just two different things. There's one, I want to clarify the two different steward roles, the working group stewards and commons stewards. I want to clarify that. And then the second thing is I want to say the original intention of the steward is not to be a title. That is like an unfortunate byproduct that I think we need to stop. But it's, the way that we originally described it is it's a role that someone can come in and energize and then walk away, not walk away from, but it shouldn't feel like it's something that you lost. And it shouldn't feel like a position of power. It shouldn't feel like you're the king of this working group and you tell everyone what to do. That's not what it's supposed to be at all. And I think that it can come across like that as, the person who's deciding everything for the working group, but it really is meant to be servant leadership and empowering the people in the working group to be more successful. And I think there's a few things that, I'm sorry, I know I interrupted you, but let me finish, because I think that there's a few things around this idea of stewardship I think that it can be fluid, and another person in the working group should be able to energize the role of steward in that working group. I don't think it should be fixed to one person. And that, you know, as working groups, we could get better at that as well. You know, we've experimented in a few working groups with like co-stewardship. Eduardo and I in Communitas, and Nate and I in the stewards working group, because I think it's really important for us to you know, come in and out of the stewardship role with grace and allow other people chances to also steward the community and the work. I have some more things to say. Is there anything you want to respond immediately to that?
You can finish. I want to say something else, but you can finish.
Okay, and then just to you know, what we're talking about is like the first nomination process for Commons stewards. We haven't had Commons stewards before. So yes, it is a little bit like, okay, how do we do it? Do we have the community decide who the Commons stewards are? Do we, you know, people decide themselves? Like, it seemed the easiest just to be like, we have a nomination process, a steward nomination process, onboarding and offboarding already. Let's use that process for the first group of Commons stewards. And just to differentiate the working group from the Commons stewards, so let's take some, you know, there's Gravity, and, you know, and they have their own work stream and they have their own objectives. You know, in Q4, they want to finish this. In Q1 23, they want to do this. So they have their own OKRs, they have their own roadmap, they have their own working group, they have their weekly sync. And then there's transparency. And then there's, you know, there's many different working groups who are focused on their work stream. And the idea of the Commons stewards is there's a few people who are focused on the TEC writ large, right? We have these partnerships that are strategic. We have this revenue, and all of the working groups can contribute to that. But their responsibility is to be focused on that, to be focused on driving the TEC forward. And it's a lot of work, actually. You know, in our proposal, we're expecting that the common stewards, like working group stewards, was expected like 10-15 hours a week of work. We're expecting common stewards to be 30, 35, 40 hours a week to really focus on the core strategic direction of the TEC and executing on it. So does that explanation help some?
Yeah. Are you finished, or I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, I want to address first Nate's comments on I guess sort of the overall responsibility. I think that's true for everyone in the TC, and I feel that like that's also one of the areas we should focus more, because bounty compensation is not great for responsibility, and so stewards should and have a responsibility, but also does everyone else. And so this is where I go back to my point on comm stewards. You don't need a nomination process for for commitment. I don't think you even I don't even think a nomination means commitment. Commitment is more contractual, more an agreement, and you can have those with people being not necessarily being nominated. And so I don't know, a comms steward after X or Y requirement, I do believe comms stewards should probably be held to, like, I don't think anyone can be a comms steward, so there should probably be some requirements to that agreement. But ultimately, what's important is the agreement, and then I still see the nomination as a political barrier, and some not necessarily great power dynamic there. But I also believe that applies to other working groups. Talking about compensation, maybe the way to go forward is with certain commitments in certain working groups that that are currently paying with bounties, but they do need someone responsible for stuff anyways, and we are not providing for any contributors doesn't have any formal responsibility, but the TC isn't also holding any formal responsibility to them back, and that's probably something to consider as well.
I want to give a total different point of view. And as I see, like, what Tom is trying to share is like there is a project to change like the way we coordinate with this new common store. I don't think like we even need like the title. Well, and also like we can get away of those two barriers like Andy is also saying. And I see like, like if Tom have a vision that something like can change the way of the TEC, and NT maybe you have another different. Like I think it's, and we think that's something wrong, but I really don't. And I think like Tom can say, okay, I'm going to do this for the TEC and put it up to conviction voting, and this is the team I'm going to work with, and this is totally fine because the token holders are voting on the team and on the proposal, and anyone can create this proposal. It's open to everyone. So I think that would be like a solution. And then, the token holders at the end of the day is who are deciding who's giving the money towards something. Yeah, I mean, that's a different point of view and remove politics on how we do things. Yeah, wanted to share.
I would like just to throw a question there that now I'm thinking with all of this that I'm listening. What would it look like maybe to just have like commons stewards, right? And not to have like a defined steward for each working group. And that wouldn't mean maybe necessarily that the group doesn't have any leadership or guidance. I mean, I feel that could come from the contributors themselves and emerge organically. I think that kind of like to what Antti is saying, but bringing it to the space of the working group. I think natural leadership could start emerging in the working groups, and that could be like the light guiding the efforts within the working group. So we might not need to have like a super defined role for working group steward, and instead just kind of like focus on having these common steward where they have these basically what Tam was saying, that definition of the roles and trying to keep up with the mission of the TEC, right? I don't know. I think that could be an idea, and I say it also because, for example, I right now I can think of Comunitas, right, with Irem and Costa. I feel that's a really interesting experiment that's going on there. I feel that working group doesn't have a steward right now, but it's finding their way in organizing themselves, and Edu is there like an advisor, and Gideon is also there as an advisor. So I feel it's a really good dynamic coming up from there. I'm not saying it will work 100%, but I think it would be worth exploring. And same thing with Sampo. I feel like Gideon, as being the working group steward of Sampo, I think he has been able to really take a really good approach to it, and being more of this leader and guidance within the working group, that has come to play in a really organic, natural way, that he feels more as a contributor and part of the group than as a manager, let's say. So I think that could be also a really good example of the dynamic that could play out with this. I don't know, just an idea to explore.
I think that's a really good point. But I just wanted to pass this over to Aram and just kind of, how has your experience been in terms of cultivating leadership within Communitas, and how your relationship with Costa, and how you guys have been delegating work and organizing around stuff? How's your experience? I just wanted to, if you don't mind. If you are talking, I can't hear you right now for some reason. Okay. Perhaps leave and come back.
Okay, I'll jump in while Iram's getting her audio worked on. I also think it's a super interesting experiment. Bear, I think it's you that made that comment. I'm hesitant, and I'll share my hesitations about it being successful. I think Iram, you want to just try if it works?
Yeah, does it work now?
Yeah, it
Awesome.
works.
I'm just sorry, go. Please finish.
Yeah, I want to finish because I do also think it's an interesting experiment. My hesitation comes around accountability. I think I just also I'm going to interrupt myself to say that Gideon is extraordinary, and I think he's helping cultivate next generation leaderships in the TEC, and I think he should get a lot of credit for that. And I think it's really important. His leadership style is just unbelievable. I'm in awe. And I want to say that, what probably, I think that there's this idea of like eliminating stewards, like that name. We could eliminate working groups and have squads and circles and interest groups. And I don't think the naming is that important. So I don't know that we need to hold on with a death grip to any of the names. But accountability is where we end up reaching the critical point. How do people get compensation? How are they getting? What if they don't get compensation? What if the working group squanders the funding? So I think that there's the problem to be solved is accountability within the group that has funding from the TEC, whatever we call it, and whatever the account, like the point of the steward is to be like, this is the person who's accountable for that, who we come to when there's a problem in the working group. And with a group of 5 people, even if they're extraordinary, like in the case of Communitas, I think we have extraordinary contributors. We might have a case where there's 5 people that aren't extraordinary, and how do you know who's accountable in that case? I think that's the biggest challenge with having a funded group, sort of a stewardless. But I'm really interested in hearing ideas and solutions. And I'll pass to you, Iram. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. You can hear me, right? All right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's very new so far, but I think it's been fairly easy to navigate. Like you mentioned, Tamara, thanks to Gideon and all these community. I mean, Nate and NT and Bear, like they've been all along, like helping me and Costa with every thing basically. So it just became this collective effort of transitioning from like Edu's presence into just like I think reconstructing and thinking of new ways how we can coordinate and how we can take ownership, and also how can we be accountable in a way that doesn't necessarily require a certain steward. But I mean, still, you're right. Like the name doesn't really matter because like at the end of the day, Costa and I, we basically just shared what Edu was doing. I mean, we agreed to take on certain responsibilities, right? Like even though that's not formal stewardship, or even though like we're actually thinking maybe should Communitas working group dissolve in the future and just let all these community building be a collective action of the community rather than certain individuals doing that, but by keeping certain tasks and like responsibilities like guideship, for example. So yeah, I really like working, maybe like splitting the work as like the steward work between multiple individuals, as like in this case, like right now Costa, we are working on really great, but I also feel confident and supported thanks to Gideon, Bear, NT, Nate, and all the other people that have been super helpful. I don't know if that answers your question of my experience so far, Nate, but also it's very recent.
No, that's perfect. At the end of the day, I think, looking at how this happens and if we can keep that accountability, it might be something worth exploring. Because my biggest fear with the stewardship and within the working groups is that either you become locked within a certain realm, or you become, you go to a working group and you have a steward, and maybe they, not intentionally, but they, accidentally or unaware of them taking up too much space and not allowing people to emerge and say, hey, I want to do this because we're going this direction or doing this thing. And it kind of closes the decision space a little bit more than it needs to happen. And so eliminating that title, eliminating that role, and just having a group of people who are, leading and sharing that responsibility, I think is worthy of exploring and experimenting with. And so I hope that we can keep doing that with the Communitas and see where, it heads and what kind of problems that you see along the way. And perhaps that is a path forward for the working groups. And maybe we don't have working group stewards, but I do think, we shouldn't be afraid to experiment with this. And I think Communitas is a great example of that. So, perhaps we can just keep an eye on that and maybe see where we go from there.
I actually hold a different point of view of what's happening in communities, because I think what's seen for stewards is about, I guess, sort of responsibility in cross working group and high level TC involvement. And while the EDU's responsibilities have been split between IREM and Costa, IREM is, at least so far, is who's been sort of in stewards calls, other working group calls, etc., etc. So like more involved in the community, and at the end of the day, they share work, but who's going to give the high level input from the community to communities is going to be IREM. So we can call it however we want, but in my point of view, IREM is leading communities right now. And so I think that goes back to the point of time. We can call it however we want. It's the same thing. I thought of an example about common stewards. Maybe it's useful. So like, let's ditch the term commons stewards and use, I don't know, maybe project manager. I don't know what's more appropriate. Let's use project manager for the sake of project manager. Even if they are project managers for the TC on a high level, they are still project managers. You on a normal case, you wouldn't nominate a project manager. You sort of contract them, sort of have an agreement with them within your department, I guess. And so that's kind of my point. I see there's value on political movements, on stewards and delegates that have stake in governance power delegated, but the stewards are contributors, like as far as I understand, contributors as anybody else, and so I think they should be held to very similar structures as in pretty much every other working group. And because that's, I think you said that, for example, contributors in working group stewards are sort of held accountable to some extent by funding, and I guess so do are the stewards, the common stewards. And so like the only thing I'm not seeing is why would we use nomination for them and not for everyone else, or vice versa? Why wouldn't we use why are not we using nomination for anybody else but just for common stewards? And I guess that's kind of where I'm at. So for instance, I think Gideon has been making a really good job on placing everyone on sample on the right place. And so I don't know how exactly he does it, but maybe there's a thing to learn from that. And if you get roles properly described, you can fit people that fit into the role. And so if anyone comes across the steward working group that sort of fits the role and there's a need, and they can agree to some extent to an agreement, to a mutual contract or whatever, there you have a new common steward.
Can I add a couple of thoughts? First of all, I think this conversation's really valuable. Because I think we're just like going into this world of like DAOs, and we don't want to adopt the models that are kind of broken from the past, where you've got centralized hierarchies and all that kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, we don't quite have the new thing figured out. This is the challenge, right? And by the new thing, I'm going to come back to the thing that Tam was saying, which is accountability is everything when it comes to fulfilling a mission. Like it really is. And so in these working relationships, we have to balance the relationships, right? That comes with the culture and all of that kind of stuff, with the tasks that are involved in actually fulfilling the mission. I feel like there are some ways of doing this, but to be really clear, like this is uncharted territory. There are models like holacracy and some other types of models that have attempted to go where we're trying to go. So we could probably learn from those models. And actually, Bear and I have been doing some looking into those kinds of things and figuring out how, for example, the idea that Antti brought up about roles, like clarifying roles of what's needed, and differentiating those from the actual people so that people can slot in and out and be flexible and move around, but that the role is actually there forever, or at least not forever, but at least as long as it's needed. So I guess the other piece of this is, when it comes down to defining these roles, I think there's accountability of the individual, and then there's accountability of the collective. And the reason that we have hierarchies, I think, is because it becomes much easier to just say, Juanca, you're responsible. Like the community is making you accountable for making sure that all that stuff over there happens as you promised it will. Gideon, same with you, and so I think that those are kind of shortcuts, right? Like for accountability to the whole, like it comes down to a specific relationship. And I think there are ways for that person who has that group accountability to run things more as like a coordinator or a servant leader, in ways that don't have to look like the old models. But we still have a lot of work to do to figure out exactly what that looks like. And the last thing I'll say about accountability is that accountability without good feedback systems is it's very hard. So I think that what Livia did with the Polis survey recently is a really good step in that direction. It's like, it would be so good. I would really love to hear feedback, not just from the Sampo group. I mean, we do that individually on the calls, but like from the community, kind of like a pulse that's there. And the pulse doesn't say like Gideon is fired from the, but it says like, oh, Gideon, there's some problems in Sampo, or the community's perception of Sampo, or whatever, right? That's like acts as a flag that now Gideon needs to take a look at that area. And if Gideon doesn't take a look at that area, then we need processes in place to be able to push Gideon out for the good of the whole. So these are just they're kind of random things, but I think they all spin around this idea of accountability, building accountability structures for this new world that we're going into, and the fact that we don't know exactly what they look like, but we've got to do some experiments, and we've got to just go with what works and just keep experimenting.
Yeah, I think that is a really great conversation that we're having around this. And I think this will continue to happen during the stewardship transformation process as we go through the advice process. And so I encourage everybody to have these conversations, engage on the forum, and discuss more about it, because I do think this is a really important topic. And, I've always been, not decentralization for the sake of. We need to, especially during this transition time, we do need to have a system that's in place that can help us guide and have more accountability among the initiatives that we're taking under. So if anybody else has any comments, please feel free to. Otherwise, we can close out this sprint planning session and move forward. I will give a 5 count. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, thank you for the sprint planning. And if you guys need anything, please update anything you want within the Zen Hub board, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again, NT Bear, Aaron, Zeb. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Take care.